The end of this week's Parsha tells the story of the disparaging comments that are shared between Miriam and Aaron about their beloved younger brother Moshe. And as our Parsha describes, Miriam, who apparently initiated the conversation, is actually struck by tsarat as punishment for her inappropriate speech about her brother Moshe. And the Torah is actually relatively ambiguous in paraphrasing Miriam's comments. The Torah tells us that simply that she and Aaron spoke al odot ha'isha ha'kushit, on the matter regarding the Kushite woman that Moshe had married. And Rashi quotes the Medrash, explains that Miriam and Aaron, they questioned Moshe's decision to divorce his wife. They assume that he did so out of some sense of an exaggerated measure of being so pious. And so they asked, as we read in the subsequent pasuk, Harak ach b'Moshe diber Hashem. Did Hashem really speak only to Moshe? Halo gam banu diber. Did God also not speak to us as well? And so Miriam and Aaron, they felt it was unnecessary for Moshe to abstain from marital life, and just as this was not expected of any other member of the nation, why would Moshe do it? But in truth, however, Chazal explained that Moshe undertook this extraordinary measure due to the unique frequency and the suddenness of his prophecy from Hashem, which would necessitate a constant state of ritual purity. But as an aside, it's also hard to overlook the glaring resemblance between this incident, as explained by Chazal, and another story involving Miriam, which the Gemara teaches in Sota, that happened many years earlier during the period of the Egyptian bondage, where we saw that Pharaoh decreed that all newborn Jewish boys would be killed. And Amram, who was the father of Aaron and Miriam and Moshe, he decided to very publicly divorce his wife Yocheved. He figured that there was no purpose in remaining married if the children were going to be condemned to die during infancy. And due to this position, his drastic decision, it was followed by so many others. His daughter Miriam sharply criticized her father and went so far as to charge him of acting with greater cruelty than Pharaoh himself, who Pharaoh, after all, only wanted to eliminate newborn boys, as opposed to Amram, who effectively ended all Jewish reproduction. Amram, in fact, takes his daughter's reproach to heart, ends up remarrying Yocheved, and as we know, later they have the child named Moshe. What's interesting is that in both episodes, both during the story of the Egyptian bondage in Mitzrayim and in the wilderness, Miriam reacts harshly to the disruption of family life. In Egypt, she protests against her father's drastic decision to divorce his wife in response to Pharaoh's edict. And in the Midbar, in the wilderness, she criticizes Moshe's separation from his wife due to his unique level of prophecy. But what's interesting is that whereas Miriam is punished for her critical remarks about her brother in our Parsha, Chazal actually appear to almost laud and applaud her efforts to persuade her father to remarry. But if you think about it, it's really very strange. After all, the Ramban as well as Shadal both teach that Moshe was indeed present. He was in the room. He heard what was said about him. Shadal actually proves this from the fact that the Torah writes just 2 psukim later that Vayomer Hashem pitom el Moshe ve'el Aaron ve'el Miriam, that God suddenly shows up and talks to Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam, and he says to them, Tzeu shlosh-techem, go, the 3 of you, all of you, go to the tent of meeting. And this clearly implies that these 3 siblings, if they were all told to go to the Ohel Moed together, it's clear that they were together during this incident when Miriam and Aaron were speaking. And seemingly the Torah is teaching us that Moshe was just unfazed by Miriam's comments. It didn't seem to even bother him at all. And if this is the case, if it didn't really matter to Moshe, why should Miriam have been punished at all and so severely? Her words had no impact on Moshe. He didn't even react at all. And so perhaps we can suggest that this question helps us understand why the Torah emphasizes that Vayishma Hashem, that Hashem himself heard what Miriam and Aaron were saying. This phrase of Vayishma Hashem, that the Lord heard, it conveys a message that even if Moshe didn't care, Hashem did. Moshe acted as though he didn't hear any of this, but Hashem certainly heard, and certainly did not allow this infraction on Moshe's kavod, or his stature, to go unpunished. And in a sense, this phrase stresses the accountability that we bear even for actions that appear to yield no impact whatsoever on other people. You see, we are responsible for what we say and what we do, regardless of whether those actions or words affect anybody else. Even if nobody hears, we need to remember that Vayishma Hashem, the Almighty, assuredly hears, and more importantly, takes note as well. And so often in life, we don't even begin to understand or even think how our actions or words can impact those around us. We just assume that if no one complains, then it all must be okay. But the truth is, we learn from our Parsha that our responsibility to care for others, it goes well beyond even what we might have initially thought. Vayishma Hashem, God's constant presence. It suffices to demand proper speech, proper conduct under every single circumstance and in every single situation, even when it seems like our actions have no effect on any other person or if no other people seem to care. You see, this really is the secret to harmony and the secret to keeping our family and our community together in peace. Shabbat Shalom.